It is 7. Stop this music. Let's get this started. I'm gonna be multi-miking obviously to the stream and Discord. So if you are in the or listening on the stream, I'd recommend just muting Discord. If at any point anybody has a question in either in the Discord, or type in the chat that we're in right now, the lab. Just put like an X, and I'll know you have a question. I'll call it. I'll say your name. We'll go over that. Same thing applies to those of you in the stream. If you ask questions, as long as I consider the questions worth answering, to be honest, because there are trolls in this world, I'll answer them. And of course, if they're about the material we're going to be going over. But yeah, let's get this bad boy started. Can everybody see the stream or see the PowerPoint just fine in the Discord? Glorious. I can't wait to be able to spam these after wins, But they have to be good wins to be able to spam them and it'd be worth a damn. But yeah, so there's some terminology in war, right? Before we even get into the terminology of war, let's talk about what war is, right? So war is a game mode where 50 players fight 50 players over a territory. You do this around the fort. There are 3 points outside of the fort. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit this out and just come to a raid plan real quick. So make sure you can still see it. Sweet. And I'll zoom in so it's a little bit bigger for those on the stream. And then we will clear the map. So yeah, like I was saying, there's 3 points here, right? A, B, and C. What you need to know about these points is each point has what's known as a bonfire. This is a fire, a bunch of fucking wood stacked up really tall that is on fire. Who would have guessed it's a fucking bonfire? We're gonna represent that, and you should when you're making these plans for your company, represent that by something, even if it's just literally a fucking smiley. So hey, this smiley represents bonfire. Normally, regardless of the territory, the bonfire will be on the right side of C point from the attacker's perspective. It'll be on the left side of B point from the attacker's perspective. Pretty much this entire class is mostly going to be from the attacker's perspective, as most people aren't going to be defending. Until you win a war, it's really hard to kind of defend from a war if you don't buy a territory. We put a little smiley face there. So if you look at a point, so yeah, let's still focus on the top level war, right? So there's 3 points. You capture it like a King of the Hill styled game mode, where if your team has more people on the point than the other team, you will tick up. Or like there'll be a circle you'll see at the top of your UI where it'll show the progress on it. After you've captured a point as the attackers, you own that point. Once you've captured all 3 points, then the doors of the fort can be attacked. We're going to represent these by the same symbols we're representing the points here. Fun fact, it reverses, which is really bad design-wise in my opinion, it reverses what the letters are for the doors based on, or like once it goes from points to doors. So in this case, A point was really going to be C gate. So just be aware of that. We're going to put star representing D gates, and then we'll put sun representing E gate here. So there are 5 gates that you have to defend from. Defenders will normally put teams throughout this. Their goal is to hold the defender's goal here is to hold you outside of the fort as long as they can, right? But ultimately, there's a point in the middle of the fort, just like these 3 outside, where if you have more people on the point than the defenders do, you will tick up. And once you have filled the bar, you will then have taken over a territory. Taking over a territory is how you get your name on the map. It's how you take Windsward, you take Everfall, you take Brimstone, you take Cutlass Keys. You take whatever territory you want by winning the war. Before you can get into the fort, though, remember you have to take these 3 points. Once you've taken these 3 points, you still have to take down the doors. And there's some PvE elements to wars that you need to be aware of. But that's like the high level macro. That's what a war is from the attacker's perspective. When you take flags, they become respawn points, but otherwise you'll by default be able to respawn at the war camp. After you've taken all 3 flags, you can respawn obviously at all 3 flags, and then you'd be pushing into the fort. So it's like your frontline move forward. Now that you understand like the high level of what war is, does anybody have any questions about what we've talked about so far? See, I'm giving people a chance to either type in chat, speak up in Discord, or type in the chat. Otherwise, we're going to move forward in like 45 seconds. What are the roles in war? We're going to get into individual roles for war in a bit. Just focus on what I've talked about so far. Does anybody have any questions about the high level macro? Squirt, we're not timing people out in the middle of a class, you fuck. Do you need a key to open the fort doors? No, you actually attack the fort doors, similar to how you would attack a mob. You just left click them. Also, Squirt Daddy, the default timeout is to time yourself out. So be happy I'm going to refund that. All right. Oh, you're good. I'll decline it. Don't worry. Thank you for the follow. All right. So I'm assuming nobody else has. Yeah, it's a group of attackers versus a group of defenders. It's a 50-on-50 game mode. Now, to talk really quick about how those rosters are filled, if you are not leadership in a company, I need you to understand the leadership in your company are putting hours of effort into what is essentially potentially a 3-minute experience if they fuck it up as defense. Or if they're attackers, it's a 30-minute experience where you're getting farmed by the enemy team and you cannot leave. It can be the best game mode you ever play. It can be the worst game mode you ever play. It's dependent on you as the player to be able to be as good as you can be and be in the right companies to get quality content. But otherwise, it's just 50-on-50. So we understand the high-level macro of what a war is now. Well, what I want to do is I want to talk about the concept of a roster. Now, let me open this up in a second tab just to make sure. Open new window. Man, I'm glad I didn't have any sussy baka fucking tabs here. Data book. Just making sure I have one that's cleared and I'm not just saying, hey guys, here's my roster. Okay, this is an old roster, but this still works. It's not the greatest color scheme wise, but it gets the job done here, right? So this is a roster, right? This is 20 people. You can see there's still some spots that are empty here, but this is an old roster from like 2-3 months ago. With the team, each group is usually assigned a specific position, right? And depending on that position determines what their individual roles are. This was what the meta was before the game released here. I'm not really showing anything that you couldn't see yourself, and this, like, I'm not losing anything from this. What this looks visually in a fight though, when you're down, especially once you're down to 1 point, it's going to be something like this, where you have the point itself, you have groups that are playing on the point that are the point team. It's usually your group 1 and group 2. You'll then have groups 3 and 4, 5 and 6. They're playing a specific part of the quad. So, like, in case, actually, we're just going to terminology because otherwise I'll go on a huge tangent involving this. But just know that, like, a lot goes into preparing this war, and it's taken a long time for it to even get to the point it was at, and it was still being innovated on every week. But yeah, so these are going to be some terms that I'm going to use throughout this experience. So anything that's high level is an army level problem. Usually the shot caller is managing these. Mid-level is group level problems. This is you as a 5-man. You probably have somebody who has the most experience or is the one calling the shots for what you're doing as a 5-man. Those of you, that is the mid-level. Low level, that's what you as an individual can do, or micro gameplay is what it's known as. AoEs is a common term in MMOs, but in case you don't know what it is, it's area of effect. Play your life is usually a fighting retreat where you're not actively trying to do things that would get yourself killed or even risk getting killed. You're playing your life, you're staying alive, because being alive is the most important thing you can do in a war. I'm more than happy to do VOD reviews live on stream of PEXs. Reach out to me on Discord, but now is not the time to do that. Point team is usually a team comprised of high HP or high resistance gamers meant to survive and create point pressure. Normally, in a point team, you're going to have an AoE healer where they're spec'd for just AoE spells to heal the club. You'll have 2 healers that are responsible, one for group 1, one for group 2. They're responsible for pocketing the rest of those groups. You'll have 3 bruisers, as ultimately those bruisers are the ones that you're going to be moving around the most on the points. Hence the name point team, right? You'll have a flail IG, normally your point or your shot caller, or he'll be a void gauntlet, ice gauntlet. And then you'll have another flail ice gauntlet, and then ultimately a DPS role, be it a DPS musket or a bow player or a fire staff. Just depends on what your roster needs. Ball team wise, so this is basically 4 groups with the same composition for the most part. It's really a 4-man team instead of a 5-man team. We'll get into why that is when we get to when we start talking about the kill squad groups. But ball groups are normally consisting of 1 healer, 1 void gauntlet, ice gauntlet, 2 bruisers, which bruisers right now are Great Axe Warhammer. There's a lot of speculation where people are whining, thinking that bruisers are going to die. Bruisers aren't going anywhere. Detonate combo is it's too powerful. It just is. I have nothing else I can say on that. Disruptor teams, it depends on where you are. That'll determine what your comp is, but the roles that you'll find in disruptor groups are, once again, kill squad healers and then regular healers. The difference between a regular healer and a kill squad healer, a regular healer usually has the rapier as their secondary. So that'd be like group 8, sometimes group 7. But groups 9 and 10, this is where pain begins. That's where you'll usually have a hatchet on your healer because they're small 5v5 fights. We'll get into the high level of disruptors most likely on the next time I do this, which will probably be in 2 days or tomorrow. Depends on how much traction this gets. White team, that's that group, not group 10 really. It's meant to support the disruptor team, usually with range of some kind, where the white group has 2 bows, 2 disruptors. And by the way, out of those 2 disruptors for most of these groups, you have the 3 builds you have are a combination of sword and shield, scorpion, where you try to have a CC combination to lock down the enemy healer. You have a DPS spear, where it's their job to kind of just pressure either light DPS rolls or peel for your healer. And then a sword and shield greatsword, which is meant to chase down bows because they can actually chase down with speed. Currently, I can't answer that Xsus. Blunderbusses got nerfed specifically because of how good they were with aim lock, but they still may be good. I personally haven't had any problems in PvP with Blunderbuss. So as it sits right now, I wouldn't expect Blunderbusses to be slotted unless the company is a new company. Stat padding. When we use the phrase stat padding, like if I throw a fireball in a clump off cooldown, I do a lot of damage. My stats look good at the end of the war, right? I must be doing my job. No, wrong. It's all about effective damage, right? Stat padding is when you're just doing things to make your numbers look good. If I'm calling a crash and you choose not to go in it as a player, we'll get into what a crash is. Just everybody doing the same thing in the same location, right? And you're not doing it because you don't want to risk dying, but you'll throw your cooldowns off cooldown outside of that, you're a stat pattern. Somebody prove me wrong. Oh, we'll get into ticking point, Lark, for sure. The most important thing in any war that you can do, and I know this seems super cheesy, but it's true. Like, the mental game is where wars are won and lost. If it's been 15, 20 minutes and you're on that last point outside the fort and you've been getting reset after reset after reset, a lot of your players are going to turn their fucking brains off, period. You need to have players with the mental strength to actually last 30 minutes in this game mode. Sounds crazy, right? 30 minutes and people don't have the mental fortitude with all the bullshit we have to deal with in the modern day. In a fucking video game, but it happens. So if you ever feel like you're getting tilted, just take a deep breath, take a second. Those 10 seconds it'll take to just cool down can be the difference between you being a liability to your team and you being the reason your team wins. High level factors you should be aware of. Remember, high level factors are army levels. Respawn timers. Respawns happen in waves. There's a Discord. I'll post a link in the chat for those of you outside of the company. But they have what are known as respawn callers. Well, they will sit in your comms and they will call out respawns, watching streams, giving you information as the shot caller. I'd recommend joining this and being aware that they do usually charge. Oh, of course, it's going to make me have to use my other. Hold on. I want to be able to share this link with you guys. Thanks for the sub, Palms. Appreciate you. But yeah, I would really recommend joining that Discord. They're really good at these respawn timers. And like that information is incredibly valuable because if your crash is 3 seconds before respawn, but you wipe everybody, it doesn't fucking matter. They all just respawn. But if you know when the respawn's coming, you set up the crash so it happens like a second or two before respawns hit, and then you wipe half their fucking army, and it's a 30, 40-second cooldown, you basically won that point for free. Remember that. Point ticking. So we talked about this briefly earlier, but you can have up to 10 people over what the enemy team is running. So like, let's say the enemy team has 3 people on point and I have 13 people on point. I am ticking it as fast as I can, right? You'll never know the exact numbers, but you'll know if you're ticking. As that point ticks, more and more people will step on, and then it starts getting critical points. Defenders make one mistake, they lose a point. Attackers can make as many mistakes as you want, and you'll get chances and opportunities to continue. Attacks are where you learn as an army to fight together. Flank angles. The reason that disruptors and such and kill squad groups play where they play, which we'll get to in a little bit, is because ultimately the best place to engage is always going to be at somebody's back, right? And the worst place to engage is going to be from the direction that they are pushing towards you, which means if you took, and I'll show this later like graphically, if you take a couple steps to the right and before you engage, or to the left before you engage, that is objectively a better engage than going right at them. Even if us berserkers, sometimes we get lost in the sauce, but you got to remember that. Safe zones versus conflict zones, we'll go over that a little bit when we show the point and how you dance around the point in a slide or two. Conflict zones are the places where a lot of fight is happening. Safe zones are where healers are usually able to play. Main point and side point. So depending on where a majority of your group is, like you have 50 people, right? Sometimes you're going to have 35 on one point and 15 on another, right? That 35... that is your main point. That's the point you're trying to win. Now, note, the enemy team may not go 35-15, right? They could put 40 against your 35, and they could put 10 against your 15. And through communication with the people who are your 15, you can know that and understand that right now your main point, the point that you have the biggest chance of winning, is that 15, not that 35. And so now you're instead of calling crashes nonstop, you're playing your life. You're making it so they have to commit so much resources, or in order to keep that point from ticking, that you're passively taking C point, and now you're down to 1 point. Yeah. Mid-level factors, healing, positioning, and range. You have to understand how to play in the range of your healer's spells. If they can't heal you, it's like you soft-killed your own healer. Coordinating is the most important thing of a war, right? The shot caller owns your heart runes. If you don't know what a heart rune is, there's a quest in the northeast part of Brimstone that unlocks. It's like Secrets of the Heart Gem. It unlocks the ability to have heart runes. Now, remember I was talking about detonate crashes earlier? Detonate is one of those heart runes. You get that from Ennead. All of your bruisers are running this detonate heart rune. That you glow, and if it's maxed out, you take so much more damage for 3 seconds, right? But at the end of the 3 seconds, you explode, damaging everyone around you. It's affected by Empower and Weaken. So knowing that, you want to have a max Empower and minimal Weaken, right? But when you have 50 people fighting in the same general area, you have we'll get into cleanse spots in mid-level. That was kind of where I was going with that. But ultimately, understanding where your shot caller is calling to crash is incredibly important. Once you know that where they're crashing, understanding where you should be compared to where they're crashing so that you can circle the enemies and then ultimately strangle them and kill them because it's your body blocking them, that is how you win the point. Your kill squad groups that entire time are pressuring and not only the enemy kill squad so that they can't go for your healers, but also the enemy healers so that when you do hit that person, they don't just get pocketed from a free healing healer. Support or zone control. If you're the bot right quad, which we'll get into the quads soon, if you're the bot right quad, you should make sure that your bot right quad is clear before you move to bot left or top right. Now, if it's overwhelmed, you need to understand that you need to move into different zones and play with that ebb and flow to avoid your group dying. If you die, you're useless. If you die with a long cooldown, you're useless. Sometimes it's worth it to risk it for the biscuit if you're near the respawn time. And then we're supporting the shot caller vision. Now, we don't really have this issue before the release when we didn't really have many console players. But ultimately, as it sits right now, PC players use a program called TeamSpeak. It's a rather old program, I know. But it's a much lower bandwidth program with a more accessibility for me, the shot caller, where you can all be in your own individual group call. And then I can whisper to you as a shot caller, and you'll see this later tonight at 10 p.m., and give you orders, essentially, on where I need you to be, talking to the whole army most of the time. I can also move groups around as I need to. so on and so forth. But like the big thing here is like if I make a call and it's clear your group's not listening, you should be screaming in your comms to follow that call as best as your group can support it. Communication from canary to main call, especially when you get to the point where you're attacking a fort, you're on 5 different gates, you can't see all 5 gates. Communication is incredibly important. You need to have people you select for each gate that's going to communicate to you the status of the gate. We usually operate with a red, yellow, green system, right? Red means that point is not, you cannot push through that door. Yellow means that, hey, I might be able to push through, but I'm probably going to lose like 1 to 2 people from my group. Green means I can push through to point, and if I don't touch point with every one of my limbs, you deserve to bench me. Those 3 colors can tell you a lot about how a fight is going. If I know that A, which I'm not even, once again, so much of the war is interconnected. I'm going to keep trying to avoid any tangents here. But yeah, just keep asking questions. Otherwise, pre-pot callouts. Absolutely. Great point, Corbin. So per that second to last bullet point, communication from canary to main call, what Corbin's talking about is that you can set up a whisper, just like I'm technically whispering to everyone in the Discord. You can, or to the team speak, you can set up a whisper to the entire point team or to me, the shot caller, right? And then say, hey, they're overloading my gate by 1 group. And so I may be able to rotate and respond to that. But if I don't know the problem exists, how can I as a shot caller call to fix that problem? Oh, you can't hear the other person. So what Corbin said, well, I basically TLDR'd what Corbin was saying right there. But noted, I'm going to make it so you guys can hear him. You should be able to. Maybe he was just low. Oh, no, voice chat was turned off. All right, you should be able to hear him now. All right, low level factors. Notice how the list is much longer because you as an individual have so much you have to worry about. Your consumables, you should be popping your regens off cooldown. There's these things called cleanse elixirs that you can buy in a war at the armories. Buy them. Every member of your army should be buying these cleanse pots. This is why you're getting farmed in 2 to 3 minutes. What a cleanse pot does is on a 25-second cooldown, for 5 seconds, you are completely immune to all debuffs. That's weakens, rends, plagues, that's dots, that's stuns. You're not immune to staggers, but you're immune to every fucking debuff. And so when I'm calling that crash, right before you run in and dump all your cooldowns, you're popping that cleanse pot so that you're guaranteed to do as much damage as you can possibly do. Provided, of course, you stack your empowers accordingly, right? It's incredibly important. Map usage. It's a little bit harder to do this once they introduce the raid concept to New World. But you can, as long as you do this ahead of time so you don't have to zoom in, you can set it so your map shows you the battlefield and you can see where our entire army is. So you can get a good feel and also where your individual group is. So you can know where they are and regroup with them. The most important thing you can do, because wars are chaotic as fuck, is regroup with your group and play with them. Confidence. I don't want no baby bag bitches in my army. You shouldn't either. If they're not willing to W key and take risks in order to get you that win, why are they in your army? Now, no, they should be listening to you as a shot caller. Taking a risk is not going directly against what you're saying because they think you're wrong. Taking a risk is maybe staying in just a little bit longer than maybe necessary because they wanted to secure that kill. Sometimes it's going to lead to them getting killed, right? But sometimes it's going to lead to that perfect critical mass where now you have the momentum and the enemy team can't do anything. You're just slowly running them over. W key, shift key, and spacebar key are the 3 most important keys. Spacebar not nearly as much post-update, but W key and being able to dodge appropriately is incredibly important. And knowing when to get out of the fight. We had a long period of time where we were really good at crashing and completely wiping a clump. But then people would just like stand there and be like, wait, what do we do now? I haven't done this in forever. And then they would get counter collapsed on where people are then throwing gravels and such on them. And there was enough of them because of how clumped up we were, our cleanse spots had worn off, that we end up dying from that. And then it doesn't matter how good that first clump went because we just lost the majority of our folks. And then scoreboard utilization. People like to look at their scoreboard and just jerk off to their fucking score, right? That's not the proper way to use their scoreboard. When the war starts, every player should press N. They should go to enemies, and they should sort either by deaths, by kills, or by healing done, so that they know which players to prioritize. Especially because if you see that there's a player with 27 kills that's a Great Axe Warhammer, obviously he's having a lot of impact, right? You should, your group, if he steps into your quadrant, should be W keying him. There's really no other way to put it. There's pretty much 5, but 4 phases of war, right? Phase 0 is prepping for the war. We have a spreadsheet. People need to fill it out, or our officers fill it out with the information we're aware of from tickets that players have, right? A big part of prepping for the war is also what you do after it. And that has to do with what's known as VOD reviews. People need to be able to record their gameplay and then have somebody who is better than them watch their gameplay and not have a defensive mindset, but have a growth mindset so that they can become better players and they're not the reason you're 5-man and ultimately your army is being held down, right? That is a big part of it. So being able to VOD review is important. Case in point, why that's the 3rd bullet point on this phase 0. Gear review is also important. There's a website called New World Buddy or NW Buddy where you can go to that. You can manually put in what your gear is so that you can show to leadership, hey, I'm serious about this. This is what my gear looks like. What can I do to improve my chances of being impactful in the war? Canary setup, we already kind of talked about that. Just being able to log into TeamSpeak, join a TeamSpeak server, and then ultimately your company having a TeamSpeak server. Or Canary, there you can get the PTB version of Discord if you go to like ptb.discord.com or canary.discord.com, and it allows you to have 2 Discord clients open. So you can have a second server with all 10 groups or like point team plus 9 groups, right? And you can be main comming in one Discord and micro comming in the other. And then people can have hotkeys to be able to talk to you in main comms. Phase 1 is, you're outside the fort like we talked about. I'm kind of, actually, we're going to bypass the majority of this as we kind of talked through this. Actually, no, we're just going to go through it. So your first point capture is usually the easiest. Either it's a complete freebie or you're able to put enough pressure on all 3 points that 1 point just falls, right? Then you get to that 2 point where you're fighting over, right? And that's where usually it's like a 15-35 by default, but you might send an extra 5 to the 15, might send an extra 5 to the 35, depending on how your fight is going. Ultimately, you're playing the numbers game as the attacker. You have the initiative, if you will, to determine where a fight's happening. If I want fights to be on C point, I'm going to send a majority of my folks to C point, for example. And then the 3rd point capture, that's the hardest part, as it's a side point and it requires some very specific macro we'll be going over during this. And then ultimately taking the fort, because of where the respawns are, there's 4 places that the defenders respawn from. It's not, and they can pick which one they respawn from. It's not effective to really quote unquote respawn camp them to stop them from being able to participate, right? Unless you know for a fact you've killed a bunch of healers. So for the most part, it's knowing when the respawn timers are and being able to defend from those directions, putting your back towards the flag, facing those respawns, and making them have to fight for every inch of land. And then ultimately, after you take the fort, how do you celebrate victory? Leandro, don't get me wrong, we're definitely yappers. You guys have seen us in faction chat, you've seen us in global chat. But I want to point out that after every war, you'll only see GGs or you'll hear me yelling on stream at somebody for being an absolute jackass. Doesn't matter how much of a farm the war was on either side. It takes more, from my perspective, it takes more guts to be able to talk shit before an event than it takes to talk shit after you've already won. That's called being a sore loser or a sore winner in that case. So don't get lost in the sauce, because just because you're winning reliably against one company doesn't mean another company's not going to come through and speed run your ass in 3 minutes. Point teams. It doesn't really matter how much of the point we hold. It matters how many sets of Jordans are on the point, i.e. how many boots are on that point. Remember we talked about earlier, you have to have more people than them in order to tick the point. As long as you're an attacker, as long as you're ticking, all you have to do is chill at that point, right? Now, if you stop ticking at that point, the attacker needs to think about, hey, where do I crash? I can send my point team as a decoy to make it so the enemy team crashes, and then I can counter crash. There's a lot that goes into what I just said, but that's the sort of logic your shot caller needs to be thinking about. We've gone over a lot, so I'm going to pause. Do you have any questions on anything that's been gone over so far? We can go back in slides-wise. Even another 30 seconds. All right. I mean, definitely not 30 seconds, but it doesn't look like anybody has any questions, so I'm going to keep it ticking. I know we got limited time to play. I know we got family, so I'm trying to make sure you guys get this information as best you can. How are us console guys going to separate macro and micro comms? So if you're one way you could do it is, as you know, Discord has an integration with both Xbox and PlayStation. So you could use Discord. I don't actually know if this part would work, but if you can be in Discord and in game comms at the same time, you could be muted in Discord, listening to your shot caller talk there, and then using your in-game comms inside of the actual game itself. If that doesn't work, your phone, you can download Discord for free, or you could download TeamSpeak. I think it's about $1 on your phone, and then you could use that with a headphone and be able to talk to your group accordingly.
Techron,
what's up?
So you're gonna give out shot calls in game as well?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
The question that got asked was, how are us console guys going to separate macro and micro comms? Delu, we're on Arctisia. But we have console players in our company, and they were able to get TeamSpeak downloaded. It was very, very close during yesterday's war, but we ultimately were able to get a majority of our folks in TeamSpeak. Any other questions? None heard. All right.
Mentioned enabling chat so that the microphone shows up above your head.
Yeah, we were going to get to that. There's so much information for war. This is mostly going to be a multi-part discussion. Otherwise, I'd be chatting here well past the war ending. Point team. So we already kind of talked about the fact that ultimately we need to have many people on the point, right? Point team is one of the biggest teams that's going to be on the point, hence the name, right? They're going to be dancing around through multiple quads, trying to find places that they can play safely. They're going to be buying cleanse pots way more than they're going to buy haste pots, especially after they get to fort. They'll probably only buy 1 or 2 depending on resets. Their job is to play their life and then ultimately crash where I tell them to crash as the shot caller. Gravity Well, Shockwave, etc. Like those AoE spells that hit a lot of people in a small area. Those are the abilities that are going to be getting dumped. I don't know if legacy servers are dead. They're dead to me. Ball teams, you guys are our front lines. You determine where the fights are unless you let the enemy team act first. Right? You're going to be playing your respective quads. Imagine a point as a giant pizza pie and it's cut in 4 slices. Point quadrants, these are the starting points for your team. Don't ever leave this point of the point. Playing as a 5-man unit, it's very important that you work as a single entity. You're hitting the same targets as your other bruiser. Your Void Gauntlet is supporting the 2 bruisers with their CC and their utility. And then when you hear the shot caller is getting ready to crash, you're holding your cooldowns. You hear the crash call. You pop your cleanse, you get active, you drop your cooldowns. Your Void Gauntlet drops an ice, blocking that way of escape and entry for the enemy team. Your Gravity Wells are going in. You're looking to left click, Maelstrom, you have a crash happening. If you use your Gravity Well or your Shockwave or any of those AoE abilities or detonate on one target, you are fucking worthless as a player to me. There's no questions about that. Disruptor teams. Now, this is the hardest part about war, in my opinion. You have to have really good micro, usually, to be able to benefit and succeed in one of these teams. We talked about earlier the roles. For example, the sender role. Knowing when to fight versus flight is your most important skill. If you have a bunch of people killing your target, maybe it's not worth hitting that target right now. If you're in danger, right? Maybe you try and kite them back away from the fight and you remove them from the war, especially if you're outnumbered. 5 people pulling out because 10 people are pushing them out, you just created an advantage for your team. Remember that. We still ultimately want to play together, but when sometimes you're going to be in losing fights. It's a mentality you have to have there. The sender role in a disruptor group, they usually run Scorpion plus a stopwatch artifact that you can get in Dynasty. Scorpion, you get from killing the Scorpion at night in Brimstone. Their goal is to pressure the healer, and with the right ability combo, you can almost have a permanent CC combo where, I've CC'd somebody for 26 something fucking seconds in a row. It's stupid. Now, note, it can be interrupted by others. You could also cleanse pot, you could stone form, but you could literally have somebody fucking CC'd for forever, and then their team just dies. DPS role, usually a DPS spear, where you'll have either a fortifying perforate or enfeebling skewer on it, and their job is just to follow the DPS around and not let them get away. Also, Sword and Shield Greatsword players, because they have so much naturally built-in haste, they also fulfill that role. Point quadrants don't mean jack shit to a disruptor team except for group 8, and even then, it's just because they have to know what quads they're really supporting. Your goal is to play as a 5-man unit. Like the disruptors should be hitting their respective targets, but the bows should be working together, or the range should be working together, hitting the same target that the disruptors are hitting. If you have 3 people hitting one, that one person should die objectively. Yeah, we can go over quads and how we call them out, Snowboard. Scoreboard's valuable information. We went over that earlier, though. But short and sweet, you can keep track of who's live healing and then look for those names. Because if they're getting massive heal numbers, you kill them, suddenly that healing doesn't exist anymore. White team, I'll get into this in a little bit. We could probably skip past one. All right, this is a point. I'm sorry for the eye bleach that just happened in your eyes. I probably should have warned you there. So this circle right here is representing a point. These squares are representing each individual quadrant, right? So this was the old meta, what we believe will be the bruiser meta now. This is usually quote unquote the old meta, if you will, of how do you move around on the point as a bruiser. This is basically how you should view traffic on the point, right? So remember you have your 4 quad groups. So bot left here. So if I'm an attacker, the top is towards the fort. If I'm a defender, the top is towards the war camp. It's all about your orientation, depending on which side of the war you're on. So bot left is that bot left side of the point. That bot left quad, they're trying to make sure this area is clear. I don't have to own all 4 of these quadrants in order to start taking the point. I only have to own enough land that I can get people on the point without getting them crashed on. So normally what will happen, right, is top left will be top left will be the point that normally the enemy team is the most dense in, which means you're fighting a lot on bot left and you're fighting a lot on top right. And then bot right is normally should be the freest if played correctly. Point team is normally playing on the top of point up here where you see my mouse. Yeah, you do flip them for attacking and defending. So like if I'm calling a crash here, well, I'll go over that when we get to the raid plan point. But the concept for a group here is, remember what I said earlier about you never want to go straight at them, right? If the enemy team is coming from the top of this, they're always going to be pushing directly down. So that's why nobody from our side is going to enter directly at the point. They're going to enter from the left side of point. Or if they're a top quad, they're going to try and wrap around and enter from where from where our pressure is inverse, right? Like we're pushing towards them. Our folks start here, they push out a little bit, they kind of clear out healers here, they push to the top of point, and then they push on. And then, so like, let's say I call a crash where this four in the top left quadrant is, right? The top left quad would try to box them in on the top left. The top right quad would box them in on the right side. The bot left quad would box them in on the bottom side. And the bot right quad is just trying to catch any stragglers that are barely getting out with low HP. Your job is to finish targets as best as you can. Now we're going to go over raid plan. This is where it should make a little bit more sense to people. So this is a raid plan that we used to use. So I mean, I can share this link as well, and if anybody from leadership in one of the companies would like it, just so you have a sample of what a raid plan could look like. So this is one common opening for attackers where you will have groups 4, 6, 7, and weak side quad DPS. Now that's a role we haven't really talked about, right? And if you look at this data book, we have the 5th role in group 2, the 5th role in 3, 4, 5, and 6. They are not playing bruisers. They're not playing Void Gauntlet, Ice Gauntlet. They're either playing Fire Staff, Ice Gauntlet, they're playing bow, or they're playing a medium spear rapier as it sits right now. And that we separate them into groups, strong side and weak side. Strong side being the side with more groups, right? So in this case, if I have 8, 9, 10 sent out to the left side of my point, that's where my strong side DPS will most likely be. They will work together. They'll be in a separate comm from their individual groups, and they'll support the disruptors. Weak side DPS will do the same thing in a comm, and like your players need to be good and have good situational awareness, be calm under pressure, because it can get very messy very quickly because they don't have natural healing. This is the one part of the army where the perk shirking heals is actually pretty good, especially if you can get Ankh. But yeah, so that's quad DPS in a nutshell, right? So we may have an opener like this where we send 4, 6, 7 weak side DPS over to A. I know it's weak side because group 7's the quad or the kill squad always on the weak side. We'll get into that default in a little bit. 3 might head to B, but if anyone's at B, they then pump fake to C. The point of this is to force them to give up either A or C because they're so far away. Because if I'm the enemy team represented by this shield I'm about to put here, right? If I have to keep doing this, my army's going to riot at me. Trust me, we've 3-point held the company before. They were rioting the whole time. So instead, they're going to shoot for either this or this. Most territories, you're going to defend C point as your last point. There's literally 2 territories that, and even one of them is like a 50% of the time, depending on the company, where A will be your last point. Historically, A is usually your first point that you would take as attackers. Then B is normally the next one to fall, where the way you take it is after we've taken A point, right? We may set up as a default like this. So 5 is top left. Remember, we're talking about from the attacker's perspective here. 5 is top left. 6 is top right. 7 is sitting on ramparts to bonfire space with quad side DPS trying to pressure their backline and make it so that their healers have to be dense over here, right? Group 10 is pressuring that C point. If they're getting tick, Group 9 and the strong side DPS, that's the 3 little class symbols here, are looking to push in towards B point. If 10 is not winning C point, Group 9 and those 3 quad DPS may go to C point to overwhelm, win that fight, and then immediately rotate back to B. Because then, let's say, hypothetically speaking, 9 walks up here, they help out 10, they absolutely dumpster the 2 lights in C. They're not needed to take the point anymore. They could fast take if they stay on, but they're not needed. Instead, they could push back towards B and hold this space here, right? So that when they look to rotate to C point, they have to fight for every inch, making it so either you take the side point, because ideally you take C point and B point is the last point. B point is the hardest point to hold as a solo point. Sorry, I know I've been yapping for 40 minutes. I'm trying to get you guys this information, so I appreciate your guys' patience. Now, that's going to go back and forth. Now, let's say you're not making any progress. They're wiping you on B, practically pushing up to war camp. What you can do is you can rotate groups towards C point. And so then it ends up looking like this, where you have 4, 6, 7 and weak side DPS on B point, and all of the other groups are on the point or on C point here. 9 is acting as an inner lane group with strong side DPS supporting them. Group 10 is always going to be as wide as can be. The reason 10 is as wide as it can be in Narnia, not fucking helping the main fight, is because the point of the kill squads is to make it so that the enemy team cannot flank you. Remember what we were talking about earlier, right? If coming right at you is the worst decision, then surprising you from behind is the best decision, as like to engage the fight. But let's say we've taken B point, and now we're going on to that last side point. This is what it would look like ultimately. But before we got to this, we're going to show this on C point. There's a little bit of prep. So let's say we've just taken B point. Everybody uses the flag on the point to grab cleanses. We get in a position here, 6 and 5. Let me refresh this so it's by default again. Back to that one. So 6 and 4 will probably be right around here. 3 and 5 will start here. 8 would be here. 9 would be here. And pretend that there's no water on this map, right? 10 would be here, right? And then so as 5 groups, selecting them all, you would actually pretty much walk in together, slowly working forward as you take more and more space. And then once you get to like this point right here, right? 5 starts moving up this way. 8 starts moving up this way. 9 still fighting. The quad DPS here are supporting 9. 10 is moving forward, fighting 10. 5 starts getting into position here. While that was happening, right? Group 4 is fighting to get in here. Point team is coming because point 1 and 2 are fighting around group 6. And 6 is getting in a position. And then we're looking for opportunities to crash as we start getting to this point right here. And then ultimately, if you're really winning as attackers, you'll know that because you'll look out at your Oppo Bond, and this is what it should look like. Where you're essentially forming a V, where they are not able to push towards the point in any meaningful way. They have to take the most inopportune direction. And if they're pushing this way, you're wiping them because you have so much DPS targeted in that location. It's all about compressing them and then wiping them. Now, let's say we just had a crash. That crash didn't work well, or my disruptors got wiped. What do you do then? That's when you reset completely back to where you just saw, where 10 would be out here, 9 would be a little bit further inside, 5 here, 3 here, 6 and 4 positioned accordingly. 1 and 2 around the groups of 6 and 4. 7 holding this line. This whole time, the weak side DPS, you're not helping 7 unless 7's being plussed. And if 7's being plussed, they're telling the shot caller, who's then telling you to go help 7. And we haven't even gotten to the fort yet. We haven't even gotten to the fort yet. Now do you see why I said, hey, I'm going to be doing this and opening this up to everyone? There's so much information here that, like, a lot of you, especially in the Twitch chat, you're probably going to have to rewatch this a couple times to really soak this information. And then slowly get to the point where you understand it subconsciously almost. And so then you can implement this into wars. This right here is what it'll look like. So let's say we've taken the fort, we've opened the doors. We'll first, all 10 groups will push up as A point or A gate or C point is the last one. We'll push up. Ranged are going to handle Warhorns from left to right. Now, note I said Warhorns. The first time, it's been a very long time since I've seen anything but Warhorns until this release. If you're a defender, you should be leveling 3 things on your territory: doors, emplacements, and Warhorns. Once those are maxed, then you can level everything else up. The reason for that is Warhorns provide a massive AoE, fortify, and health regen buff for your team, for everyone who's around that Warhorn. You can destroy that as attackers using ranged damage. So as you push up to, for example, the A gate, your melees will be pumping on the door, right, with their left clicks, but your ranged will be clearing up these horns from left to right until all of the horns are down. You don't want them to be able to blow horns while you're going into the fort. After A is about halfway down door health-wise, what you'll do is you'll send your group 7 and group 8 to those back gates as you see here. They're ranged, handling Warhorns on the way there, as there's a couple in the back as well. They'll then push up these stairs here, and then they'll go to their separate gates. They need to push together, though, because defense-wise, it's very advantageous to be holding people on those stairs. I'm going to sit down. I've been walking a lot today. Once you get to the point where your group 7, group 8 are back here, A gate is destroyed, and then ultimately, no, fuck you. You're waiting till after this class. Actually, no, you know what? Fuck it. You got the reward. We'll fucking do it. Just understand it'll take me a second. Oh, man. Walked 1,000 miles in somebody's shoes, they say. You waited till after I lowered my desk, too. Thank you for the 300 bits there, Squirt. All right. So as I was saying, let me just make sure my shit still looks good. Yeah, sweet. So yeah, once you're at this point, 8 points halfway, 7 and 8 went back. 8 points down, or 8 gates down. You've taken out all the horns. You're then pushing from A to B as a Zerg. You're probably leaving groups 3 and 5 because those are your melee groups back at A point. You're going to do the same thing to B point. Once B point has been taken, or once B gate has been taken down, horns are destroyed. Then what you'll usually do is you'll send group 5, group 10, and the respective quad or DPS back to A point, and then they'll hold that gate as best they can. While 4, 6, 9, damn you fine, and all the weak side DPS then go to the C gate, right? After all of your gates are destroyed, which you can tell up top that they're destroyed, but you should be getting updates from the people that you're that you've elected as your gate leads, if you will. Once they're at a point where they're like, hey, our gates are green or our gates are yellow, you're able to push in. Once you push in, groups 3, 4, 5, 6 need to push to get to the point as soon as possible. It may seem counterproductive. The exception to this is obviously make sure your healer gets in, okay? But by being on the point ticks. If the point's ticking, the enemy has to bring more people. If the enemy has to bring more people, the gates are less defended. If the gates are less defended, your respawns can push forward. That's the logic behind this, right? So you push to the point, you start to tick it, you play your lives, you're waiting for your shot caller to call it crash. He's probably going to call it right after a respawn calls, or he's going to call it counter crash. He's going to wait for the enemy team to crash, and then we would ultimately send on them after their cleanses have been finished, right? And then over time, we take the point and we take it. Now, before we can do that successfully, though, your disruptors have a couple jobs to do. Group 7 and Group 8, they're handling the stage. The stage is the area that I'm walking 8 along while I'm trying to walk in real life. That area is known as stage up top, where there's a big gate behind you. Their first job is to keep that area clear. Once that area is clear of enemy players, then they'll look at the stairs leading down to the dirt. Once that dirt is clear, then they may look at dirt itself. Their job, though, is to essentially think of it like they're sweeping the trash off stage into hell, which is the area right below the stage. The mosh pit, if you will. In the mosh pit, groups 5 and 6 should be there. So if they see people who are low HP falling off the stage, they should be cleaning up. They're the dustpan. 7 and 8 are the broom. 5 and 6 are the dustpan in that case. Quad DPS, weak side will be on the C side in dirt. When we talk about dirt, dirt is for the respective points where 7 and 8 are right now, right? So that's where the quad DPS or the melees would be. The range, though, will go up with groups 9 and 10. And their job is to control the top of B, like up top on the wall above the B game. If you can control that area, you can be raining hell down. You can be healing for free. You can be absolutely massacring people from up there. If you can control top, you're usually going to win the war. It's very rare, unless like they call it all in and you guys just don't respect it. It's very rare you lose a war while you control top. So, what have we talked about today? We've talked about the high levels of war. We've talked about what a war looks like from start to finish, the different phases of war. We showed a example roster comp or composition. We've talked about terminology you should be aware of: bonfire, oppo-bon, top left, top right, bot left, bot right. How you can communicate with your folks. We talked about what are your solutions, especially as console players, to be able to handle communications, because communication is going to win or lose a war, flat out. You're going to keep losing against PC players until you figure it out. Whining about it's not going to fix it. You could quit the game if you choose to, but I promise you, wars are incredibly rewarding when you start cooking with them. By start cooking, I mean winning objectively, right? Don't get lost in the sauce, though, about winning. Defenders have, I think it's a 60% advantage, okay? You're going to lose a lot before you start to win. But that's where the VOD reviews come into play, making sure your bruisers are using their combos accordingly. Your Void Gauntlet and Ice Gauntlet users are putting their Ice Shower along the escape routes for the enemy army. People are popping their cleanses accordingly. Healers are getting heals off in time. They're placing their sacreds in their respective quads so you can dance around the point with the point healers placing their sacreds wherever the crash is being called. All of this, there's so much that goes into a war. 50 people have to work together. It's not something that the average Joe gets to do. That's what makes this game special, and that's why we played it for as long as we did. But I'll be going over probably a War 202, if you will, where we'll go more into probably ball groups first, how a ball group should play, and we'll probably show an example of VOD. I know there were folks who asked for me to be able to VOD review their VOD. While I can't do that tonight as I have a war I still have to prep for, we will, or shoot me a DM on Discord, on VDecron on Discord, and we'll see if we can get your war VOD reviewed, like sometime tomorrow probably. Just let me know. But yeah, this was War 101. I hope this helped you guys. I hope this gave you some direction. I know wars can be a very dark and scary place where you don't know what you're doing, but my DMs are open. Just understand that I need to prioritize things for the company, but I'll keep doing public discussions like this. It seems like this was pretty popular, objectively. But yeah, any questions from Leandro? No problem, Deontay.
X payout.
X payout these nuts, Corbin. How did I get so handsome? I ask myself that every day.
He got tips from me.
It's definitely not you, big boy. XD. Glad you're back though, Corbin. I think it's been a minute since I heard your voice.
Any of you guys watching the Reekwater War?
It's probably only the tip.
No, you know what? I'll watch the Reekwater War and then I'll manage this roster. And so we'll do a little bit of a candid stream. Does anybody